Thank you, everyone, for being here. Can you all hear me? All right. Is that better? We're good? Okay. What I want to first bring up is that today's debate is not just about the First Amendment. It is about the First Amendment on college campuses. This is a crucial difference because college campuses are a unique institution within the public sphere, right? They act as little subcultures and ecosystems of the greater society, and therefore there's a different set of rules that are going on because it has its own ecosystem. I want you to keep that in mind. In what follows, I will be presenting my argument that hate speech should not be protected as free speech on campus, and I'm going to respond to what I foresee as some concerns, and they might have been voiced by some of the opposition already. I'm going to respond to those, and we'll see how you feel about that afterwards. As I said, this is about campus speech. First and foremost, the primary directive of any institution of higher education is education. It's in the name. That is our guiding principle. The First Amendment is at play because it is a government-funded institution, but it is still about education. I want to argue that hate speech undermines educational pursuits. It does it for everyone involved when there's a bias incident that happens on campus. A bias incident in the industry is what we call is when something like hate speech happens on campus, but it need not always be hate speech. When hate speech happens on campus, there's an audience. It doesn't usually happen in a vacuum. There's a targeted audience, right? There's someone who it's meant to harm. That person is going to have psychological trauma. Anyone who has had trauma-informed training knows that there is harm being done. Cortisol floods the brain, capacities to be able to speak and communicate are infringed upon. There is real physical harm happening. On top of that, there is consequential harm in which they might feel like they are being silenced, that their viewpoint is not equally weighted as the person issuing the hate speech. That's just the perspective of the targeted person. There's also the wider audience, the greater community that you all are a part of as being members of a university campus. You are also affected by every single instance of hate speech on campus. You might be an ally of someone whose identity is targeted. You might be witnessing it firsthand. You too experience psychological trauma. On top of that, it affects the psychological safety of the entire community. Psychological safety is a necessity for open discourse. If you do not have psychological safety, you don't feel comfortable approaching your boss about an incident that you saw. You don't feel comfortable approaching a peer, telling them about something that happened over the weekend off campus. You need psychological safety in order to have open discourse. In addition to this, any speaker or issuer of hate speech also is harmed, believe it or not. When you issue hate speech, no one hears you. Let me repeat that. When you issue hate speech, no one hears you. They hear your hate. They don't hear your message. They don't listen to your viewpoint. They hear your hate. That is it. You are not effectively communicating. So you are actually harming yourself. On top of all of this, because hate speech is currently protected, the university is also limited in interacting as an active bystander when an incident happens. What do I mean by this? If an incident happens and we don't really know what's going on, we want to find out more. Too bad. If you invite that student who might have been accused, we don't know, alleged, of a hate speech on campus, just the act of inviting them into the office to talk about that incident could be construed as restricting their freedom of expression. How are we able to investigate if we can't even ask these questions? We can't do that because the First Amendment is an obstacle, a barrier to that conversation. We're not even accusing the student. We're asking a question. So, as I said, everyone involved is affected by hate speech, not just that targeted person. As such, I say there is no place for using hate speech on campus. And I want to be clear. As a philosophy of language person, I am using my language very precisely here. There's no place for using hate speech, but there is place for mentioning hate speech. How can we educate if we don't talk about it? But there is a difference between use and mention. When you use a word, it might be something like this. Example, using the word Emily. Emily is really great, super awesome. She knows what she's talking about. Right? Mention. Emily is a 5-letter word that has Latin origin and might meet rival. Sorry, guys. There is a difference here, but there is no use for hate speech. You can teach about hate speech contextually, informatively, in very provocative ways through mention. You don't have to use hate speech. That is why I want you to vote no, but I'm not done. In responding to some concerns that someone opposing this position might have, possibly on defining or administering this process, I say we already have those in place. For those who are not familiar, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which helped put in place legislation protecting against discrimination for race and country of origin in particular. Title VI and Title VII are the most cited from that. Title VI is to protect people who are engaged in a training program, students. Title VII is for those engaged in employment, faculty, staff. You're also affected by campus speech. Heads up, that's a thing. We have that in place. As a result, there was also the Higher Education Act of 1965, which had the Educational Amendments of 1972, which is where we get Title IX. If you've been anywhere near this campus in the last decade, you know Title IX is an issue that we talk about here, right? We have the Office of Civil Rights in Title IX here. Title IX is exactly what we need to be able to regulate hate speech. We can already regulate in terms of harassment. Do we define harassment in terms of specifics of what you can and cannot say for harassing someone? No, we define it based on the harms done and the actions taken. How do we investigate when something happens? We have people who are trained by trauma-informed training, who are specialists in the field, who acknowledge that it is a gray area, it is contextual. You need to know everything about individual cases. This is enough. It's a baseline. It doesn't have to be perfect. The point is to catch the most egregious cases, to also catch those accidental cases, to educate, to inform, right? To foster open discourse. So not only do we already have the operations in place to be able to expand this, but we definitely should, right? To reiterate my points, everyone is harmed when hate speech occurs. No one gets out without some type of harm. So the First Amendment needs to not protect hate speech, to allow the spheres that happen on campuses that pursuit of education. You need to have equal access, equal opportunity, equal consideration. That doesn't happen without open discourse, psychological safety, and the freedom to investigate when things happen. I ask you and I urge you to vote no on the proposition for tonight. Thank you.